And we are live. Welcome, friends, to the Collector Showcase with Luca Tiger Braun Network, Luca Nation Network. I am your host, PC with DPZ, and with me I have Adam Gray from PWCC. There's a lot of acronyms in there. PWCC. Adam, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about our collections and get to know you a little bit better.
Great, thanks. Yeah. You know, I think a lot of folks are going to remember you from the iconic top 100 that you had this show that just recently ran its completion. I thought it was fascinating. You got a lot of different takes from a lot of different people on why the cards were important. This show really is going to dive into the why behind the card and why you personally collect it. There's iconic cards, and then there's just cards we just love, and sometimes they're not the iconic cards, but sometimes they are. But there's a reason why they are iconic, and it's because people want them and love them and they like them and they want to keep them. And it's like the end journey for a card is to end up in a collector's hand that doesn't leave it. That changes the narrative on pop control and all that kind of stuff. Because if you have people that just want to keep the card, well, then population's important, but how important? So talk to me a little bit about your journey, and tell us more about yourself. How did you get into cards? What was the first card that you loved, that you coveted, that you wanted? What kind of sports, or what kind of give us a little background on Adam Gray and why you love cards so much?
Okay, so when I was really young, and I'm talking like when I was 3 years old, I remember going to the daycare that I went to, and everybody there collected cards, baseball cards. And I remember my mom would take me to Toys R Us, and we would get these bags. They were like these giant bags that had all of these like different types of baseball cards. And it wasn't just like 87 tops. It was like all of these, like some were sport flicks and some were tops and some were little cards and some were jumbo cards. And there were all these different cards, and you'd put them in your box and you'd take them to the daycare, and then they'd get stolen at the daycare. And, you know, you'd like trade some at the daycare if you were lucky. Like that's kind of where I started. And really, like since then, I've always been a collector. I never took a break. I never had, like most people say, I came back. When I never left. I worked in a card shop for like 7 years. I flipped my way through paying for college, flipped my way through paying down like a good portion of my down payment on my house. I just always collected and always loved it. And you know, back in 2015, I started the first basketball card podcast. And then a few years later, we started Basketball Card Fanatic magazine. Those are the magazines that you can see behind me here. We do a monthly card collecting and focuses on collectors and collecting, and not so much of the you know the sales data. We have a little bit of that, but it's for passionate collectors, and that's what that's what I've sort of been about over the course of the years. You said one thing, and I haven't thought about this question in a long time, but you said it was the first card that you got that you really wanted. I remember that, and I don't think I've ever said this to anybody else. So I'm going to answer that question. In 1990, Hoops, it was first year that I like tried to put together a set. The biggest card in the set at the time was the David Robinson card. Now, I want to make sure that this makes sense, because everybody knows about the 1989 Hoops David Robinson. That's
right.
Card number 138. It's one of the most iconic basketball cards ever made. I'm talking about the second year David Robinson card. He's like posted up, and it says Rookie of the Year on the card. And I remember going into this little card shop, and they were selling one for, I think it sounds insane now, but I think they were trying to get $20 or $25 for it. David Robinson was the name in 1990. Right. He was the biggest name in the hobby. People always say, "Oh, it was Jordan." No, for a period of time, it was David Robinson. At least here in Salt Lake, that he was the guy. And I wanted one of those so bad, and so I opened, I don't even know how many packs of Hoops. My mom would get like 10 packs at a time and put them in the glove compartment. And then if I was really good one day or whatever, she'd give me a pack. I opened pack after pack after pack, thinking that this David Robinson card was like the biggest card in the world. And then, I finally got one. And it's funny because it wasn't even like a short print or anything. It was probably worth 50 cents when the Beckett finally came out. And I was there when that first Beckett came out. I remember that. But that was probably the first card I ever really wanted. And now here we are, 33 years later. And in a lot of ways, I'm saying the same thing. I'm still chasing certain cards. And now I get to work for PWCC. So my career is cards too. And I'm just a card collector. I love cards, and it's been a big major. It's been the hobby of my life, and I don't have intent on doing anything else. I just love it.
So the 19, that's a really cool story, especially with the 90 hoops. It's such an interesting take because most folks would want the 89 hoops. There's two of them, right? There's two 89 hoops. There's the one that I am myself. There's two cards that survived my past. Like I took a big old break, right? I came back in like 19. I took a big break, but the cards that survived that I kept in nice little holders that I thought were going to be like, the future of my, I was going to be rich someday, was a 1989 hoops, David Robinson, the one where he's actually shooting though, or where he's not the one where he's holding jersey. And the other one was the 1990 Leaf Ken Griffey Jr. And I mean, they're both slightly off center. I think they might be PSA 8, PSA 9s, or SGC, or whoever you grade, but I haven't sent them in for grading yet. But it's interesting, the cards that we think back in the day are going to be so important. And so, I mean, I realized it later on. You realized it within a month of the card being bought. So, but I remember that card, the rookie down at the bottom. It was the gray, that 90 hoops set was really cool. So that's a really interesting story. So why David Robinson? That's the first like foray into like, I need this card. I find it. What happens after that?
So I think that the most crucial moment of me in my young collecting years. So I grew up, I have a lot of money. My dad's a hairdresser. My mom worked in food service. We didn't have a lot, but for whatever reason, for my 9th birthday, they really did something that, like, at the time I recognized was a tremendous sacrifice. They bought the one card in the world that I wanted the most. I grew up here in Salt Lake, and I loved the Utah Jazz. We had a power forward at the time who was second in the league in scoring and second in the league in scoring for over a decade. Every season, he never missed games and played so hard, and took us to 2 NBA finals. That was Karl Malone. And so for my 9th birthday, my mom and my dad bought me a Karl Malone rookie card, and they put it in a little, it's funny, I remember all the details about this. They actually put it in a deodorant box. Karl Malone rookie card, a John Stockton rookie card, an Akeem Olajuwon rookie card that had like really banged up corners, an Artis Gilmore rookie card with banged up corners, a couple other cards that I can think of off the top of my head, but they put all this together in a box, and I opened it, and I remember opening it as a 9-year-old being like, what is this thing, this deodorant thing? Like, I remember thinking, why are my parents giving this thing to me? And then as I my mom was like, Adam, it's just open the box. And I was like, oh, she put cards in a box. And so I open this thing and I'm flipping through, and I get to the Karl Malone, which I came to find out later on, like, they paid $60 for that card. And I knew at the time, like,
that's a lot of money.
It was incredible that they had found it, because, and that sounds crazy in retrospect, it'd be incredible to find. There's so many of them at that time, in that world, in that point in card collecting history. So many people were collecting, that finding those key cards, even though there were tens of thousands of them, finding those was really difficult. So the only way they could do it is they could card shop in Salt Lake, and there was only one, the Karl Malone rookie card. And so when they gave that to me, I felt like this sort of like, wow, this is serious. Like, they were willing to do this thing for me that was so kind, and such a sacrifice. It was $60. That is a lot of money. And I think, that's when I was like, wow, this is like going to be an important part of my life. Now, who knew that, 30 years later, it'd be my career, and I would be like for one of the biggest card companies and like talking about cards all day, we obviously didn't know that, but I knew that it was going to be important to me. And And so that was the next big chase. And then I think, after that, there was always looking for something. But that Karl Malone card, I've said this, that Karl Malone card, I still own it. I will always own it. I would never sell it for anything because that's, that is sentimentally as valuable and as meaningful as I think any card could be for anybody, because it really like started my path.
Right. And that's a big topic of conversation on this on these episodes, is the sentimental value of the card. I think it's important to explore why, because that is why we sometimes spend money, and more money than a lot of folks would think is deemed, responsible, on some of these cards that we just love so much. Now it's morphed into, this is an investment. It's sort of, we're having the second phase of like, if I buy this now, later it's going to be worth something. That happened back when we were collecting when we were younger. Now it's happening again, and maybe it's even happening in this year, because people are going to think the market's down, time to jump in and grab some cards. So there's always that thought of like, okay, good store of value, which is what I like to think. Good store of value, not so much an investment, but a good store of value. Because at the end of the day, we love the card. If you're a collector, it's not so much an investment, it's a store of value, because you love it and you want to have it. You don't really want to sell it, because if it was an investment, then you sell it. That's what my wife always laughs at me. She's like, why do you keep saying that when you're just never going to sell it? You're going to keep it. So what's the point? I'm like, that's true. So I stopped using the word investment with it, and it's a good store of value, because if I never needed to liquidate it, I could, but I really don't want to. So how did you get to the point where you're at now? So I've kind of given us a little bit of a peek into what started it for Adam. Okay, it was the 90 David Robinson. It wasn't even one of the 289 hoops, but it was the 90s hoops David Robinson. Okay, you learned about, supply and demand, lots of supply. And then you have this really amazing, memorable moment that includes your mom and your dad, which, cards and our parents and our brothers and our sisters, it's a lot of fun. It's like a rite of passage for a lot of us. So you've had this moment. Now you have the sentimental value. You've learned a little bit of something. You've learned something. You've coveted something. Now you have something you feel you love. Like, and I'm a Gonzaga guy, so I love Stockton. Big fan of his. So you're very lucky to be able to have enjoyed him as long as you did there in Salt Lake. But now you have this. You got these two very important factors to being a great collector. The sentimental attachment ties in with your mom and your dad, is wonderful respect you have for them, which is a wonderful thing. And then you also have this, okay, this is a business. There might be more of this card than I know of, and the value of this card might be less than what I think it is. Wow, my parents spent that much money on a card, but there's also a 90s hoops David Robinson that's worth 50 cents that they're trying to sell for $20. Walk me through how you've kind of learned, and maybe walk through your journey from that point moving forward, how you got to where you're at now. I know it's a long period of time, but maybe just, fill us in.
Man, I haven't thought about a lot of this before, but I think I have some important moments along the way that really did what you're describing. And I hope I can answer this question well. So I mentioned that I worked at a card shop. I worked at a card shop for about 7 years, and I served an LDS mission in between that. And so it's really over the span of about 9 years where I was either working at a card shop or in contact with that card shop. And that gave me opportunities to buy and sell a ton, right? Part of my role there was buying. And I realized along the way, like the way that the manager would buy cards there, like, I remember what he would say every time somebody would walk in, and he was a great guy. I love him. I love this guy. He would say, we buy at 20% of book value. If you have a $20 card, we'll pay you up to $4 for it. The best way you have to sell your card is to sell it to a private individual. He would sort of just list this thing off. And I realized that people didn't resonate with that. What I realized is that people wanted you to like act like a human and have a normal conversation with them. And so what I started telling people, I took a totally different tact. I said, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you what I think I can sell this card for. And I'm going to give you somewhere between 50 and 60% of that. And if you don't want to do it, I totally get it. But like, book values don't matter to me. I don't care. I do not care what the book value is. The only thing that matters is what I think I can sell that card for. And at that point we had historical, historical pricing via eBay, which is pretty brand new at the time. This is late 90s and early 2000s. Most people didn't know you could click on sold items on eBay, and I discovered that I could do that, and it sort of opened the world to me. Not only buying and selling for the card shop, but on my own. I noticed this was the coolest thing. The card shop in Salt Lake, it's called House of Cards. We had this wall. It was called the bid board, and the bid board had like little pegs in the wall that you could hang up a tag, and the tag was stapled to a card. A card was like in a holder and was stapled to the tag, and there were places that you could place bids. It was like an in-house auction that anybody could sort of look at the wall and bid what they wanted to.
Wow.
And the barrier to entry to this was like almost nothing. It was 25 cents or 50 cents an item, or 15%, whichever was higher. And so I realized like there was stuff on eBay that sold for so much more than sold locally, or so much less. And I realized whenever you have like a difference between the two markets, if that difference is greater than what your fee is, you can make money. And I realized this is like, I'm not even joking, a 13 or 14-year-old. I started buying and selling on eBay, and at the card shop, it was like 30. And I just idea of like making 50 cents, making $1, making $2. I remember people would call me a buck chaser, right? Because I was just figuring out ways to do this. And I did it for the shop. I did it for me personally. I had some that were, as time went by and the late 90s came, I had some that were bigger flips. I didn't call it flipping. I didn't know what that meant, but I had ones where I'd buy something for 50 and sell it for 80. And I thought it was so cool that I could do this. I also realized there were times where people would put things on the bid board and they wouldn't write anything on the tag that told people what the card was. I realized I could use like different colors of pens and write different things and highlight different aspects of the card. And I could market the card, right? I could talk about the card and why it was like a really cool card and what was notable about it. And what's interesting about that is now you fast forward to, it's January of 2023. That's a lot of what my job is. It's taking the card that we're selling at PWCC and it's saying, okay, why is this card significant? What does the end buyer need to know about it? And I think if I was looking at this card to buy it, why would I want it? What's that thing? And it's like here I am. I'm an accountant by trade, CPA by trade, but that marketing, that ability to sort of look at something and understand why it's cool, I always loved that. And so all of these things along the way allowed me to flip. Again, there's that word again, allowed me to flip. I paid for a good part of my mission. I came home, I paid for a good part of my car, and then I paid for like I paid for several semesters of school, paid for a good portion of our down payment on our house. I just kept flipping cards along the way, again, using all of the different avenues that were available. And at the same time, maintaining, like in some cases, I was maintaining my own collection. In some cases, some points along the way, I was just interested in making money. But as the years have gone by and as I got into my career, I've been able to sort of step investing so much. I don't really, or flipping so much. I don't really do that anymore. If there's a chance for me to make a lot of money on something real quick, I'd probably still do it. But I don't really do a whole lot of this flipping thing. I do a lot more of how do I find the card I really want that's important for what I'm trying to do in my collection. And unfortunately, that sometimes takes, like you said earlier, it takes selling something from your collection to then buy the big thing that you want in your collection. Sometimes it's not always buying a bigger thing. Sometimes it's just something that you really want. But my eyes are always open, discovering new things, learning new things, discovering players I want to collect or sets that I want to collect. And as that moment comes, every time you have something new introduced to your mind, you have to reassess your collection and say, is this more important than what I have the chance to get? And if you ever have a chance to change something that you don't like as much for something you really like, then you have a decision to make. And that's, my collection is the result of doing that over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that I didn't really do what I do today as far as my career goes, but like as far as my collecting, which I think that's how I've gotten to where I am. The last thing I would add is a few years ago on the Blowout Cards forum, I decided one day out of the blue, I was like, I'm gonna count down my 100 best cards, and I decided to pull out a spreadsheet and I listed my like 120 best cards, and I rank ordered them by what I could figure their best value was. And I thought, let me count these down and talk about the card, why I like it, why I think it's important. Started 100 and then count down to 1, and I'll do 1 a day and I'll see if people like it. And the reception that I got from it was actually really amazing. There was just lots of commentary, lots of people reaching out. And I realized, hey, this is a really cool way to collect. And so now I still do the same thing. I have 100 items in my collection. I sent the balloon a little bit bigger than that, but I'm always thinking, can I take 2 cards from the 80s and 2 cards from the 60s and go get into a card that's like in my top 30? I'm always trying to figure out ways to do that. And that's kept the collection fresh and allowed me to sort of focus on what holes are like in my collection that I need to sort of keep. And it's super rewarding. I love it. It's been one of them too, because last point on this, it's easy to become a hoarder in our hobby, and have it on how many things you can have in your collection is kind of good, because it forces you to sort of stay at that level rather than sort of always accumulating stuff along the way.
Wow, so many great nuggets. There's so many clips there to be used. That last little piece you just explained was actually really insightful. Plus, I want to ask a question. So I feel like collectors do this, where you're constantly looking to improve the collection, or you think you're done. And there's the famous last words we all use as collectors. I'm done for a while now. That's the card I really wanted. Now I'm done. I'm just going to relax. I'm just going to enjoy what I have. I'm not going to color up anymore. I'm not going to sell anything anymore. It's like the most ridiculous thing we could ever say, because we never do it. We always, whoa, that came on auction. Oh, PwC has this on a monthly auction. There's always something we're catching our eye, and then we're going, oh gosh, I want that now. I didn't want that 2 weeks ago, but now I want it. And it's like, now I got to figure out what I'm going to sell. And so you have this collection, like you said, it's always evolving. And I've always said, well, I have to use capital from what I have to buy something else. I might sprinkle a little bit something in there to help get there sometimes, but for the most part, and we do that, and we all say, oh, I only use the capital of my cars. No, you don't. You take money too, and you apply it, and you make it work. You make it make sense. And I've kept perfect records of like everything I've bought and everything I've sold in the past 3 years. So I know exactly where my ROI is based on what I currently have, based on what I've sold and what I started with. So it's kind of eye-opening when you add up the total number of all spent before you delete out all the stuff you've sold to get there. But once you start quickly eliminating that number down, making yourself feel better, you arrive at your number. You go, okay, I'm still at a good ROI. Mine right now is sitting around on 28%, which is, finance people like we are, that's a great number. And knowing that what I have in my collection is a very strong collection. It's good. It's low pop, sought after. People I tried, Mike Trout, Ken Griffey Jr., and Kobe Bryant, and some very iconic cards, high grade. I'm like, okay, I feel good about these cards. I feel like they're going to hang on through anything, really. But you kind of start here, you go there, but you're always doing that. And you're sometimes, and this is the question, I guess, a very long roundabout. This is a cage question, very long roundabout way to ask a question. Is it okay to sometimes sell for that loss and throw some money at something to get something you really want to keep evolving your collection? How do you handle it? How do you reconcile that in your head from a finance standpoint?
So I am different today than I've been in the past, but I think a lot less about how much money I'm making or losing on a card than I do about how much I need it in my collection, because I agree with everything that you said about store value and investment. I think you're right about that. But like when a card pops up, I want to distill the decision down to the simplest forms possible so that I can make the best decision possible. And so, I'll give you an example. A few years ago, you mentioned Kobe Bryant. Probably my favorite card in my collection is I own the 2012 Prism Gold Kobe Bryant. It's number 1 of 10 too. So it's the very first Kobe Gold Prism card that
Very
exists.
cool.
The very first copy of the very first one. It's one of the best cards I've ever owned. And when it hit, when I saw it show up online, I looked at that card and I said, I just have to figure out a way to buy it. And then the question in my mind became not which cards do I have gains on that I can now solidify, that I can crystallize, I can now take my gains. No, my question was which cards can I move that I need least? And so I remember
Exactly. Yeah.
I had two Yao Ming 04 exquisite limited logos cards, and I thought I can sell one of these. A Gordon Hayward National Treasures Logo Man RPA, which is his best card in existence, and he'd moved on from the Jazz. And I just looked at it and I thought, this is a great card, but like this is a couple $1,000s that I can use toward the Kobe. And so I figured out what I had to sell that my collection could afford to lose the most. And some cases because I had duplicates, some cases it was because I had that player in a better card that fit in my collection better. And I still had to make some really hard decisions. I'm not gonna lie, like selling cards is always hard, but I made the best decision that I could to move cards from my collection could afford to lose the most. Some people would say you just sold the cards that you thought had capped out most on value, but that is not true. I've sold many cards way before I should have sold them from a financial aspect because I wanted to stay true to this point that I wanted to keep the cards in my collection I needed the most. And so I remember put together the spreadsheet. I figured out how to get there to the number that I had to hit to buy the card, and I made it. And I never looked back because that Kobe sits really, if it's not at the top, very close to the top as far as like my most favorite, valuable. It's everything. It's like, honestly, if I had to sell everything, it's probably, I don't know if it's the last card I'd sell. It might be the last card I'd sell though. It's one of very few because to me, because of all the reasons why I love that card, right? And we don't need to get into all of that, but I think that's the question. Your question about like the losses, I don't even know if some of those cards had losses or not. Some of them probably did, but I don't calculate gains and losses the same way. I like I'm trained to do that for stocks and for a fund. I just don't think about it that way because I want to think about building the collection, not the gains. I don't want to think about the gains.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. There's a part of me that kind of, as you were speaking, I'm thinking maybe I should just purge all this information and get rid of it, or hide it somewhere so I don't keep looking at it, or stop keeping track, because that's just an endless feat of trying to. Because at some point it's just going to get ridiculous. It's like counting all the money you spent on coffee the past 12 years, right? I mean, 12 years of buying coffee, you're going to look at the number and go, "What? Could I've saved money buying it somewhere else? Could I have made it at home? I mean, goodness, I could have funded my child's college with this amount of money." That it gets to be daunting when you look at it. But then you're also thinking about how are you looking at this in the end? And I always feel like I do the same thing you do. I go, well, whatever. I don't care if I'm up and down in something. How badly do I really need this? If I really want this, I need to get this. I wanted a first Bowman Chrome Mike Trout 9.510. I just wanted one. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to sell some cards. I even have a couple extra trouts I don't probably need. They're not the most important trouts. They're just kind of random ones. I'll sell those and couple it with these two cards, and that'll afford me the one card. I like to keep it between 40 and 50 cards, slabbed cards that are important. I try to keep it. I was up in 200s at some point. I'm like, I don't need as many cards. This is silly. I'd rather have 40 to 50 meaningful, really important cards, or keep it a number that's reasonable, right? I kind of feel from a Providential standpoint, I need to be smart like that. So that's I think really the direction this conversation is going, it's a PC collection conversation, and it's at its very core, but it really is diving into and illustrating how to not say properly, because properly means something different to everybody, but how to responsibly curate a PC in a way that's not overindulgent, which again is tough to say because we're all collectors. The very nature of collecting means we want to collect things. We don't want to sell them just to keep our collection a certain number. That's mainly because I'm, a banking nerd that I got to make sure. Okay. And my exit strategy has to be good on all these cards, but even that's not even smart to think about. What are the last things that would go? And I don't know, you've been through this for many years, and you've arrived at this conclusion. I've arrived at this conclusion in a few less years and going, I just would rather there's like a handful of cards that I just can't, they're the last ones that go. Like I got an 05 finest white super refractor of Kobe. It's a 101 superfractor. It's only white superfractor, and I confirmed it with Spinatron, so I know it's true because he's the guy. It was the most expensive card I ever bought. I think I'd never get rid of it, and it's just a random superfractor, but it's the only white one, and it's Kobe, and I'm like, I'd rather have that than have 40 different cards that equal the same value. Correct? You know what I mean? It's just, as a collector, you get to that point where you're like, there's certain cards you just have to have in your collection. So tell me about more of those cards that you just have to have. Like, what's on the list? So you've put together a collection. How many slab cards do you have right now? What's that number for you where you like to kind of stay in, or is there a number?
So for me, it's 100 items in my collection. And what that means is that in some cases, an item is a set. So next to me right now, I have almost all of my cards that are in my home. The majority of my collection, by far most of my best cards are at the PWCC vault. That's another conversation for another time. But I would just say, at some point your collection, you lose comfortability with having. At least I lost comfortability with having it in my home all the time, thinking, when I left to go on a vacation, I was worried. Somebody was going to break in and steal stuff. I have a large safe that nobody's going to be able to get into, but still, like, there's fires and there's things that happen. And, I've heard people who have fireproof safes where then the safe still gets hot and it still melts the plastic around the card. I've seen some of these things happen. And I've heard about people putting cards in their bank vault, but their bank vault, floods, and then they lose everything. And people ask, well, did you have it insured? And it's like, no, I had it in a vault, so I didn't have to have it insured. There's all these different things. The reality is, no matter what you do with your cards, even if you give it to a group like PWCC, there's always the possibility that something crazy happens, right? But to me, the easiest thing to do was to send most of it to PWCC. So with that said, I do have, I have this stuff right here. And you asked about a quantity. I have the complete set of Eminence basketball from 2014 here, which is 50 cards, 50 base cards. And it took me forever to put the set together. That's one spot on the 100, but it's easily the spot that takes up the most because it's too full your shoebox. And besides that though, I have the vault, the stuff that's at my vault, which I think is like 100 cards. And then I have another, I don't know, maybe another 30 cards that are here. And that's for me, my whole collection. As you were talking though, I thought of two stories that I want to share about these cards that mean more to me, or that mean a lot to me. Do you mind if I tell one of the stories real quick?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what this is for.
Okay. So, I'm trying to figure out which one of the two I'd rather tell. So I think I'm going to tell you this one.
Tell them both.
I'm always long-winded, so I'll just tell you the one. Earlier this year, I discovered, and I know this is mostly about sports cards, but earlier this year I discovered that there was a set that was produced in the early 2000s, 2004, that was around Harry Potter cards. And people have heard me talk a lot about Harry Potter cards, but I think this card fits into this discussion really well. So I had so many cards in my collection that I really liked that allowed me to acquire a specific Harry Potter card, which is very outside of my normal wheelhouse. I've, over the last 30 plus years, a couple of years in the middle where I did like some vintage baseball, but besides that, I've just been a basketball card guy for 30 plus years. When I discovered the Harry Potter card existed, I read Harry Potter to my kids at night. I watched all the movies. I don't even know how many times with my kids. I was there for all the premieres. Mm-hmm. It's been an important part of my family for going on, 10 or 15 years now, longer than that. Like 15 years now. Like we've really loved the series. And so I didn't know that these cards existed. Well, there's one card in the world of Harry Potter that's easily like the Grail of Grails. And one hadn't sold publicly in years. And once I discovered that it existed, really became obsessed. And I moved a number of big cards, including some Michael Jordan stuff and some Kobe Bryant stuff, that were cards that I didn't want to have to move, but I felt like I needed to be able to go get this one card. And I did it. And I have the card. Well, the card finally sold publicly for the first time in years. And it actually sold for less than what I paid for it. And when that happens, there's like this feeling, right? Like this, oh, I lost money. Like, and everybody's had
Absolutely.
that. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
what's funny about this is that here I am professing, just focus on your collection. But the moment that I had this moment of like, Adam, you overpaid for something, like I still felt it. So what I did in that situation is I really like doubled back around to like, okay, Adam, why did you buy the card? Do you really care how much it's worth right now? Does it matter to you what it's worth next year? Does it matter to you what it's worth that the year after that? And the real answer is no. I still had this heartache, but it didn't really, I just don't really care that much. I'm still glad I own it. It's okay that it sold less. It sold for marginally less too. It's not like it sold for half as much or anything, but it's a reminder to me that have something that you really want. And I'll show it off here. I almost forgot to show it off.
Yeah.
When you have something that you really want, that's the thing, right? So this, to me, this is the most money I've ever spent on a card, even more than all my basketball card stuff. And to me, it's, if I had to say it's one of my very favorite cards in my collection. It's this triple autograph. It's, like I said, widely considered the Grail of Harry Potter cards. These autographs were signed when these kids were 12, 13, and 14 years old. It's
Wow.
the
That's so cool.
actors that play Harry, Ron, and Hermione. It's all on one card. They made approximately, under 50 of them. And, when you think about it, like where those kids were, like in their lives and the history of the world and how big of a deal Harry Potter was when those came out, the fact that that the card exists, that they all signed one card, and that only a few people can have it.
Yeah.
Was something that once I realized it existed. And again, I only learned that it existed literally 12 months ago. It was January of 2022 that I discovered it existed. I was moving to move just about heaven and earth to figure out a way to get it. And I don't even, again, sold for less. It's worth less than what I paid for it. I just don't care. I had to have it. And I just love it, man. I just love that card.
That's a really cool story. I like the story. I mean, my wife and my daughter, my oldest daughter, are just obsessed with Harry Potter. Like, all she talks about is Harry Potter, constantly. So, that definitely hits home for me and seeing that. And it's so kind of cool seeing them all. Harry Potter's it's just a phenomenon, right? So you really can't go wrong. And the connection for your family, your kids, and everything, that's just, you're right. And that takes it beyond monetary value, but you instinctually still have that feeling. This is developing into one of the better episodes we've had on this series. And the reason why is because we're talking about so many of these little things, these little instinctual feelings, these thoughts that we're all having privately. We might talk about it a little bit. Maybe we have some conversations with some of our hobby friends, but we're all instinctively having these feelings about the hobby, the ups and the downs, the markets, how much money we're spending. All of us have families. Some of us have younger families. And we have to think about, what some of these decisions mean and how do they impact, we sit here and go, oh my gosh, it's going to cost $2,000 to replace a water heater, but we'll gladly drop that money on a very unimportant card in a collection. And it's so interesting how that all applies. So we're talking about all these things, and I think it's important.
So let me jump in real quick, because
Yeah.
I think this is what you just highlighted there is, to me, one of the most important parts of the whole hobby that we don't talk about enough, which is our real life expenses actually matter, right? You and I, we've got a similarity in that we both have our young families with our young kids. I have 4 kids. And I don't have a whole lot of extra income. I don't. And so I've had people ask along the way, how do you feel comfortable spending some of these things? Like, I spent so much money on the Harry Potter card. It almost makes you sick, right? You think about what else you could do with it. So for me, and I'm just going to describe for me, I'm not going to tell anybody else what they should do, but for me, I made a decision a long time ago that I would only use my money that I could get from cards to buy other stuff. And the boom in the market a few years ago created an opportunity to sell some cards for a lot more than I paid for them, and then turn it into other things. Now, some of the things that I've turned it into, probably from an economic perspective, including this Harry Potter card, probably wasn't very smart. But like the way how my wife and I have been able to sort of get comfortable with it is, she has said along the way, hey, if you're making your own money, not from your job, but you're making your own money on cards and then spending it, that is totally different than spending, your money that you're making. Because she works at home, right? She takes care of our kids. She takes care of the home. She does most of the good things that we do in the world, right? She's the one who's on the PTA. She's doing the big things that make the world a better place. But she doesn't make money for doing those things. And so, where I have to, like, when I'm out working, that's that. And so it's really important for me to think I am being responsible with that other money, that other hard money. But in some, that's what I allow myself to use. I don't spend $1 of our money. I spend it out of my card funds. And so even if I lost it all, like even if it all went to zero, we would be okay, and she would feel all right about that. And that to me is pretty different than how some people, I think how some people spend. We can't overextend ourselves. It can't become gambling. You can't be breaking boxes thinking, am I gonna get something in my next box that's gonna make it so that I'm okay? That at that point is something that's destructive to me. It has to be
Correct.
it has to be within your means, and we don't talk about that nearly enough. So thanks for letting us have a second on that, because I think that's really important.
Well, yeah, I think we're definitely gonna clip that. That's a brilliant explanation as to how to be providential with your finances and to be smart about it. And your wife's at home. The formation of your children is more than any job could pay. It's so important. I think you're right. It's not talked about enough, and I think a lot of us kind of sweat and go, "Oh my gosh." The one thing I will say is that you can sell and you can liquidate stuff, which is nice. If there is a market to liquidate it, which is great. It's not like sometimes you buy a car and it instantly goes down in value and you're really in trouble. There's an opportunity to get something out of it. Or if we're gambling, you go and you spend money, you get nothing out of it. So there is that helps you, but it is correct. It's important to have the right mindset and to be thinking about it, in a way where like you're using what you have, and you might be throwing some little extra in there, but that's okay. I think it's just, it's taking the temperature every so often and going, wait, where are we at? Do we have enough? And I'm a banker, so obviously I'm going to tell everybody, have your reserves set. Make sure you have enough to cover a rainy day. You don't want to overextend on revolving credit. You always never use more than 70% of any credit limit you have. That's going to ding your credit, make it look real nasty. So you want to always keep it below 70%. Those are really easy tips. We're giving some free tips here, guys, on being smart and being credit wise. I think you have to sometimes, like, I just remove it myself. I remove it away and go, okay, it's over here. And these are fun. These are nice. I can sell it. But here's the next question I'll ask. And since we're having this topic of finance, then you run into this issue because like this, from a tax perspective, now you got to pay taxes on all the gains. And, I classified it as the business for my first 2 years of doing this, but I really wasn't. I think this year I'm not going to do that because I just feel like it's a hobby. I'm taking a loss most of the time because I'm just moving it into another card. It's not really a business. It's something I'm just enjoying. It's a hobby. So it needs to be sort of classified in that nature. And of course, this year, of course, we're not going to handle it. 2022, if you're less than 200 and less than 20, combine those two things, then you don't have to worry about it. But, for those of you that this year, you will instantly, just like that. And we're not looking for CPA advice on this episode, but I think it's something that people still need to be mindful of, though, right? You have to be mindful of when you're liquidating some of these cards to either buy other cards or because you just need to go buy that water heater or whatever it is. You can easily do it because it's kind of nice. You could just do that and have some money in your bank account. to handle some of those needs if you need it, there's going to be tax to pay for that. There's going to be, I think it's 28%, I believe, or even higher than that. You're going to be paying on the proceeds, which is pretty much everything. And then your cost basis isn't going to matter because it's not a business, right? I mean, I feel like it's something that we should all be thinking about too when it comes to moving cards and selling them. And I think it's going to be a real thing this year, if it hasn't already been for folks.
I almost brought it up earlier when you were talking about it. I get people who come to me all the time because they want advice about these things because they know I'm a CPA and for a long time, a lot of years that I've had gains. But the thing that I would say is that every situation is different. And whenever you hear one line of advice, sometimes it might be right, but your individual circumstances really, really matter. The thing that I would tell everybody that I think that I've done really well is, I've done a lot of things wrong, by the way. I don't want to boast, but this one thing I've done really well is years ago, I completely separated card stuff from Adam Gray stuff, right? Adam Gray and family is completely segregated from cards. And so cards is like its own business. And so when I get to the end of every year on a cash basis, I can see what happened. I can see how much cash went out, how much cash came in. And then I also have sort of like an inventory number of what's this cost or what's this worth. And although I don't make my decisions, I don't let the tax tail wag the dog, right? As we like to say, I don't let all the tax repercussions influence exactly how I'm going to buy and how I'm going to sell and what I'm going to trade. I don't do that. I don't believe in like harvesting losses and that sort of stuff. It's not, I understand why people do it, but it's not why I make the decisions that I make. I make the decisions based on what I want, but having all that data for when it's time to do taxes is really important. And then, people will ask, well, how did you do it? And you talked about some of the things right at the beginning. Did I classify it as a business? Did I classify it as a hobby? What are the rules if I have a loss? How many years out of 5 do I have to show a gain? What does that look like? If I get a 1099, does that mean I need to file? What if I don't get a 1099? All these things, like I can answer most of these questions with my little bit of tax training. I was never a tax accountant, by the way, so I'm no expert on this. I know enough to have gotten the regulation part of the CPA exam, but yes. So in answer to your question, one, I would strongly recommend segregating all of your hobby stuff on its own. Put it on its own thing. Have your own PayPal card, your own one place where all the cash comes out, and then where all the cash comes in, and it all filters through that. Have a spreadsheet that has an income statement and a balance sheet on it. Like, do that. Keep good records. That's my number 1 advice. But then my number 2 advice would be, like, you've got to talk to somebody else who understands how this works. And unlike many areas of tax law, there's like some real ambiguity around how certain things ought to be handled. And some people tell you, no, this is exactly the right way. I've heard smart people interpret laws. I would never, ever give people advice on this, because sometimes people might really trust me and think, oh, this is what you have to do. No, I don't know that well enough. I think it's hard, but if you can stand behind it and support it, especially with a CPA who agrees with it, then that's usually a good place to start. It doesn't mean you're not going to get it audited, by the way. It doesn't mean that they're not going to try to take more from you. But I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, no, all great information. I think this topic has been talked about. It's been talked about for sure. I've seen episodes where there's folks that talk about it, but it's, and there's a lot of folks that the instant disclaimer comes out, go talk to a CPA. I don't even want to try to give you advice. Nobody wants to be in that situation where you're handing out advice where you're not the expert and you don't want someone to make a decision. So, I think good record keeping is very important too. I've kept a spreadsheet where I have everything logged. eBay is a wonderful place for information. They help you keep track of that too. I've leaned on that heavily with where I sell. It's mainly there, and I've kept great records of that, and of course it's there. And it only stays there for so long, but that's why you want to capture it on a spreadsheet and stuff like that. So in that sense, I don't really want to purge all my information, because it's nice to have it to fall back on. The last couple of years, I have filed taxes as a business, but I just know that moving forward, I'm just not going to do that, because it's just not one, right? Carry on.
Yeah. So on that same note, and a quick plug for my employer,
Yeah, go ahead.
we do an amazing job at PWCC of keeping track of of a lot of this detail. And then unlike eBay, where you have a rep, you have somebody you can actually reach out to who can help you on some of those things.
Great.
Um, I had an instance last year where I had something that I needed to ask about, and I had to get some more detail on. And just to make the story quick, I had somebody get back to me that day, and we were able to work it out. And that's really nice if you can sort of say, okay, what information do I actually need for my taxes? Oh yeah, and they were able to give me this quickly. There's a report that exists that's easy to go grab. There's detail that's easy to go grab. There's then there's help from
Awesome.
people who can help you get more. So, and I
Awesome.
would imagine it's not just a PWCC thing. I would imagine pretty much anywhere
Mhm.
that is an auction house allows you to do that. But if you're selling things on your own, if you're doing it at a card show, if you're doing it,
Mhm.
if you're doing it without the help of something electronic, especially if you have cash, that's
Mhm.
harder. And to some people, the answer becomes, what do I really like have to report on? You sign at the end under penalties of perjury that you are reporting on all of your income. So I'm not going to tell anybody that like, hey, like if you don't do it that way, you're damned or whatever. But like that's what you're agreeing to. You're saying this is what I'm doing. It shouldn't just be about getting a report, but people have different feelings on that. So
Well, they do. I think what's important too is from a banking perspective, a lot of people feel like, "Oh, I can sell at shows, get all this cash, and then I can avoid all of it." Well, not so much, because anytime you deposit over $10,000, you're going to have, there's going to be a form filled completed on that. And if you're trying to avoid that by either asking the question or going in 3 days in a row with just the right amount to not trigger it, then you're going to get another report filed. And so there's really no way around it. And honesty is the best policy. I always say that. Just honesty is the best policy. It's just better to be honest about all of it. But anyway, at either rate, I think just people reevaluating how they look at that too. There's more people in the space. I know you can see there's a lot of anxiety around that, going, how in the world am I going to handle this? But lots of great information. A good plug for PWCC. They got a lot of great information there on their site. So take advantage of all that all you can. Digital trails and paper trails are wonderful to have, especially when it comes to this. So moving on from all of that wonderful information, I think this show is jam packed with great information if you're a collector. If you're selling. So great stuff. Thanks so much, Adam, for that. Let's work into one of our last segments of the show where I ask you, and you've already showed me the Harry Potter card and the backstory behind that. You talked about the 2012 Gold Prism Kobe. I'm so envious of you, but one thing about the hobby, the sports envy of other people's collectors, it's not the same kind of envy. It's a fun envy. It's like, oh gosh, you're lucky to have that. It's so cool that you have that. I love that you love it so much and that means something to you. There's something about it that's sort of fulfilling. I don't know. It's weird. You don't get that really with anything else. It's usually you're just like, I just want that too. But with sports cards, you just truly enjoy the fact that someone else is enjoying it. Like you enjoy one of your cards that you just love so much, right? Um, so any events, so you talked about fireproofing, safe, PWCC Vault, which is a terrific place. I mean, literally, I can almost drive there from right here. It's about 2 hours away from me where I sit right this moment. So I'm not very far away from Tiger. It's in Tigard, right? Tigard, Oregon. They're the PWCC headquarters. I could easily just pop down there. So it's I'm definitely going to be thinking about placing some of my bigger cards there, to be honest with you. But whole other conversation. Let's talk about those cards that in an event you had to vacate your home. Say you had them all with you. Let's pretend they're out at the PWCC vault, which is a great place to have them. What other cards would you be grabbing and making sure you had in your possession? Or items?
I'm a card only guy, and so for me the answer is cards, and I'm tempted. I guess there's two different ways to take this question. There's the what to me is like the stuff that is sentimentally the most valuable. I mentioned the Karl Malone rookie card earlier. I have a 1986 Flair Jordan rookie that was a BGS. That's a BGS 1.5 that I've owned. I don't even know how many Jordan rookies at this point, but I've always kept my 1.5. Sentimentally, I would never let that card go. And there's other cards sentimentally that I could go to, but but maybe I'll sort of take an answer that's somewhat in the middle of those things. There's the value play, and there's the sentimental answer to this. That Kobe Bryant gold card to me is probably, that's certainly one of them. I have a couple Jordan cards. One is the 1997 Metal Universe Championship PMG out of 50. Is one of the last 5 that was made, and the reason that's kind of cool, those were actually, a lot of people don't know this, those were issued via redemption. Not a redemption for one card, it was a redemption for the entire set. And so you can imagine being a kid in 1998 and pulling a golden ticket redemption that said you have received a complete set of Metal Universe Championship PMGs. Please redeem this. And I don't know, who knows how many of those were redeemed, but if you redeemed it, you got all of card number 46 out of 50, for the whole set. And, I have the Michael Jordan, of that. And, from a value perspective, it's probably my most valuable card. I also love that it's 10% of the set that did the redemption, because it looks equal to the rest of them, but it's similar to the greens and the reds, where 90% are red and 10% are green. Well, in the championship set, 90% were pack inserted and 5%, 90 were pack inserted and 5 or 10% were redeemed. What would it be like? It could exist out there today. One of those 5 sets could just exist out there today in its like little plastic wrap. It could just be out there in somebody's home, and it's worth, I don't know, it's worth more than $500,000. It's probably worth close to $1 million just for that one block of cards that's sitting out there somewhere. So that's probably, that's another one. I've got another Jordan that is also at the vault, that is his his Metal Fusion, his gold, which is out of the Molten Metal set. It's serial number to 40. It's the only time that they did the serial number in the card out of it's die cut. So it's number 10 out of 40 die cut into the card. And, from a value perspective, that's certainly up there too. The Kobe 2012. I also have the Steph from 2012 gold, from 2012 Prism that's gold. But as far as cards that I wanted to show these real quick, because these are here and it's fun to show. It's fun to show cards real quick.
Absolutely.
I have a few cards that are here that I just love, and some of them I've shown off before, some of them I haven't. This is a card that I never thought I'd get, but I added recently. It's not a high grade, but it's got amazing color. It's the Kobe Chrome Refractor card. That's one that's here that I love. There's certain cards that you don't think you'll ever have the chance to add. And then when you do get it, this isn't the sort of card that I normally go for. There's way more of them, but still amongst Kobe rookies, it's really rare. I got this. I've always wanted one of these. The card that was always the most expensive in the Beckett growing up, the George Mikan rookie card.
Oh, of course, remember that, yeah.
And I love that one. But then, so three more real quick. Always wanted this one. The Legends, the first Wilt Chamberlain autograph. If I remember right, he has 475 total pack inserted autograph cards from his career, and that's the first one. But the last two that are two cards that are two of my favorite cards in my whole collection. Which one do I show first? I'll show this one first. So I mentioned Eminence earlier. This is a patch autograph from first year Eminence, which was $7,000 a pack. And the USA patch auto set to me is my favorite insert from that set. This is the USA off of the original Dream Team jersey. So, for me, the original Dream Team is easily the greatest team ever assembled, and that's sort of like the logo man off the card. It's kind of heresy that they cut the jersey up.
I was going to say, wow, that's pretty incredible that they do that, but that's good for you though. I mean, if for Eminence the set, right? That's pretty cool.
For sure. That's the only one of the cards that's come out that's had that quality of patch. And what's really nice about that too is that the card is, sealed directly from Panini, 1 of 1, and I got it right when it came out. And so I've actually, like, this card moved once. The guy who pulled it sold it to me, and I bought it. That's it. Yeah. I bought it back. Gosh, it's been 7 years ago since I bought that. The last card, the card that I like, again, if I had to grab, these are the cards that I would grab if I was running out of my house right now. This card right here, this is the very first Ultimate Collection, or I should say, it's the very first stamped serial numbered autograph patch of Michael Jordan. It's the very first one. There's only 23 of them. It's a lot of people don't like the patch. I actually really do like it. I like patches that are more simple because in today's day and age, it's hard to know whether a patch has been replaced or not. No one's replacing a patch with that tiny little bit of color.
I know, that's small bit of second color. Yeah,
small bit of second color, but
it's still a two color. Yeah, it's
still a two color. But the red is off the number. You can see it sits above the black jersey that's in the background. And again, it's his very first stamped serial numbered autograph patch card, and there's only 23 of them. And so, you know, it's not just an autograph. People like, a lot of times people collect because they're like, I want the autograph, or I want the patch, or I want this thing. And I used to do that. I've kind of, over the last decade, moved into this idea that like the card is what matters. And so the card has to have a story. It can't just be a cool autograph patch. There has to be something significant. And that was the first year of Ultimate. Ultimate had, I think it had like 5 different autographs of Jordan that were numbered 1 of 1. He had 1 autograph patch. 1. There were 23 of them. And that same year, there were 23 Upper Deck Series 1 autograph patches of Michael Jordan. And then there were 23 out of Series 2. And so that's a total of fewer than 70 first-year autograph patches. They never made autograph patches before that. They made autograph jerseys, but they never made autograph patches that were set apart. They're fewer than 70. And I wanted one for years. And then in 2021, a friend was looking to move it. And the same thing is with the Kobe. I just figured out I've got to figure out a way to get that card. And so still have it. Super grateful for it. And if my house is burning down, that's one that I would just figure out a way to have with me, just because I just love the card.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Adam. What a wonderful stories. And we've got quite a few of them in here. We got some great advice, card advice, collecting advice, just, you know, life advice on how to handle buying and collecting and selling. Again, if anybody has any questions for Adam, please let us know in the comments below. This has been a true pleasure. Adam Grail is at PWCC. Again, everything you see on PWCC, you probably see Adam here pop up now and then in the iconic 100. 100 is obviously an important number to you based on how you collect and everything you do. So very cool. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's a really cool series. I think it's all is it all documented and archived somewhere, or we can all go back and watch that iconic 100 countdown again?
Yeah, it's on the PWCC YouTube. It's also on our website. If you go to our website, you can find it and then see all 100. And yeah, if you ever have any questions about where to find it or how to find it or whatever, just DM me and I'll be happy to help you.
Great. This is Adam Grail. I am DPZ. You can find us both on Instagram. I'm at PC with DPZ. And Adam, how do they find you?
I'm at the Real 27 Guy.
At the Real 27 Guy. Go check them out. Go check out the iconic 100. Thanks for joining us today, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, please let us know below. Subscribe to Luca Nation Network, Luca Tiger Braun Network. You can find me and Adam as well. Have any questions on collecting? Maybe not tax accountant collection questions, but, you know, every other question. But thanks again for being a part of the show, and we'll talk to you all soon.